Welcome in, everyone, to the Rotoworld Football Show Q&A. I think we'll be spinning up a few of these throughout the year. I don't know if we'll do it weekly, if we'll do it once a month, for waivers, God knows what. But this is my first in a while, so hopefully see everyone here. Fire away your questions. If it's Jonathan Taylor fallout, Rotopat says he can cry on command, fake cry, act and cry. I can real cry on command if you ask me about Jonathan Taylor, and I'll also give my opinions on the situation. Week 1 DFS, I can find out who's playing in week 1. I know Rotopat always makes fun of, me, Kareem, and all the sicko best balls about not knowing the week 1 schedule and knowing the week 17. He's right. I don't really know the week 1 schedule, though it's really not hard to put the puzzle pieces together of, I do know Chargers play Miami. That's going to be quite the fun chalk game to absolutely get jammed on. So, fire away. First round of waivers. I think like Scott Fishbowl has first run of waivers as well, if I remember correctly. So, should be some juicy stuff. Got updated the rankings. I nuke Taylor. I think there are a lot of bad outcomes that are extremely present that I don't know if I was right or wrong in discounting them up until 2 days ago, but I didn't really think were possible. I was we were out in Stamford, Connecticut, where our home base for NBC is, where they film, the happy hour and stuff. All of the good football Rotoworld Football Show crew gets on, gets to do a few spots on the happy hour. And offhandedly, we're talking about good high variance running back picks in the first few rounds. Tony Pollard, he's a little undersized. He's not tiny. He's like 210, if I remember correctly. But, he's not a giant, right? He's not 6'1", 225. But he's an elite efficiency runner. He is an incredible pass catcher. He can score from distance, and they have no one else to use to score from close. So I think he's going to do that too. I love that type of high variance profile where all running backs really have pretty tragic floors, no matter where you're picking them, adjusted for price. Early rounds, a lot of busts, but the RB1 overall, if that guy turns out to be the peak of Christian McCaffrey or even Eckler in previous years, it's hard for a receiver to outscore that guy. So as much as I'm a little zero RB, sorry, hi Kyle. Family Guy old man voice. All right. Hey, how's it going? Thanks for dropping in chat. Even if you don't have questions, just drop your comments in chat so I know people are seeing this, because the most terrifying thing, I think this is actually really vain to say, the most terrifying thing is that I'd be speaking to the ether and no one be hearing it. But anyway, we're on the happy hour. I'm talking about early running backs who I think are worth the risk, because they're all risky, but some of them have sick rewards. Luckily, we spent most of our time talking about Tony Pollard. I was like, Tony Pollard, if he gets the goal line work, if he gets 240 carries, he doesn't even need to come close to 300. He's a smash. Love it. Oh, and this Jonathan Taylor fella, we used to draft him as the 101. What is he going to do? Not play football this year? No, get out of here. This was 3 hours before the 4 p.m. deadline. He's playing football this year, buddy. Don't worry about it. There's real scenarios where he does not play a snap of football this year. The Colts can they can basically hold him hostage and say we are going to leave you on the PUP list. You won't get your accrued season. Or if they activate him, he is forced to then play for them, which he also does not want to do. So, I think it's most likely that he comes off the PUP list. This is what I think will happen. He comes off the PUP list. They healthy scratch him. He doesn't want to play. It's like Deshaun Watson. They healthy scratch him, and then they trade him. Except this one, the trade happens in season. I think it happens probably close to the Halloween deadline. That's the trade deadline is on Halloween or whatever. So I think that's the most likely scenario. But is it entirely possible that they can't find a trade partner and they continue to healthy scratch him? Or that he comes back and plays? I don't think he's playing for the Colts, though. I think he is 100%. I think he's 95% never taking another snap for the Colts. Actually, I'd even put it past 95%. So if they don't find a trade partner, things get real sticky real quick. And given this supposed Jalen Waddle asking price, even if they were given a little bit back, given this supposed Jalen Waddle asking price for the Miami deal, they have to come so far back to get into a realistic zone of a trade happening that we're in uncharted and very bad territory with Taylor. So I think I dropped him like RB27. Like I'm taking James Cook over him, Javonte Williams over him. I flipped coins on him versus Alvin Kamara, like Pacheco easily over him, Rashad White, all of the guys who we kind of colloquially say, oh, this guy used to go in the 5th round before we started fading running back so hard. I'm taking those guys over him literally hours after saying, what is he going to do? Not play football this year? He might not play football this year. So that's a good old L I got to take right after really loading up on him in best ball too. Sorry, I didn't bring my glasses, so it's hard to read. But Lane Furlong says, half PPR, I'm out of the 12 spot. 2 of Tony Pollard, Wilson, and St. Brown. Talk Tony Pollard up. I'll go Tony Pollard. You used to be able to get him like deep into the 2nd or even the start of the 3rd round in best ball drafts. And then people kind of wisened up to how absurd that was. So give me Tony Pollard and St. Brown. I could see the argument for Wilson too. But I'm going to go with what is a little more proven and still a really strong offense. I think the Jets are a better offense, but Lions are a really good offense. And also St. Brown was so close to destroying last year had he not gotten brought down inside of the 5 and at the 1 just an insane amount of times. There are scenarios in which the 2022 season plays out and Jamal Williams has 12 touchdowns and St. Brown gets another 5. And they don't really have other options to reduce his target share. Like Jameson Williams not playing till at least week 7. What is it? So, and frankly, I'm not expecting a ton from him almost as a rookie, right? You didn't really play much as a rookie. Jahmyr Gibbs and Sam Laporta are solid short to intermediate pass catchers, but they're not guys who, they play positions who make it really difficult and are rookies, but rookies at positions that are really difficult to take this alpha wide receiver down a peg. Just not happening. So if you wanted Wilson, if you were like, I want to lock in Wilson, he's playing with Rodgers. He's great. He is great. He is playing with Rodgers. I have him on ranked higher, but I don't think you go wrong with either of those. And we'll go with Pollard. I think really, though, you can't go wrong at this spot. But give me Pollard and St. Brown. Final answer. Jake says, I do have a question. Weird league setup, half PPR running back, tight end. Wait, what? Oh, half PPR for running backs and tight ends, 0 for wide receiver. Picking at 5, looking at Kelsey, Chubb, or Bijan. I'm probably going Bijan here. Yeah, it's that is a really weird setup. I'm definitely going Bijan here. I think maybe you could swing me to Kelsey as well, but unless your league mates are weird about the receiver scoring as well, I guess if you're asking for Kelsey, Chubb, Bijan, you probably know that they're going to go with the top receivers, Eckler and McCaffrey or whatever. Yeah, give me Bijan. That's my thought. Bijan looks like the next incredible running back. It is college profile, both incredible tackle breaker, long run breaker, and really, I think, underrated as a pass catcher. His pass catching numbers were good, but when you look at how he was accruing them, he was moving the ball downfield. I think he had a 6 ADOT last year. 6. That would be the highest in the NFL. I know it's not the NFL, it's college football. That'd be the highest in the NFL I think we've ever seen for a guy with more than, some low threshold, 30 targets. So to me, Bijan looks like he plays on an offense that we know is incredible at producing efficient runners. Last year we had Tyler Algier, a solid prospect. Fine. I wasn't expecting a ton coming out of college. Was extremely efficient in the system. Cordero Patterson in back-to-back years, extremely efficient. Even their deep backups, like Caleb Huntley, I think, or not. Is Caleb Huntley? I don't remember. Even their deep backups are at least were on limited samples, but it kind of checks out when the starters were also this way, really efficient. Now you put what to me is like a tier 1 running back prospect of the past 15 years, like better than Zeke, I think comparable to Barkley. I thought McCaffrey was kind of in this range, especially for fantasy purposes, because we knew what he would be as a receiver. That's kind of we're about rounding out where I had these guys. I think he's better than Fournette as a prospect. So to me, Bijan, I'm taking him over Chubb very clearly. I think I'm projecting Bijan to get more work as a pass catcher because he was an elite pass catcher in college. Chubb can maybe make that ground up, sans Kareem Hunt being on the roster, but I think that is to more of a leap in logic that he has never been a pass catcher really, and he will be that guy, than it is a sort of leap in Bijan going from college to the NFL. Will have to translate that skill set. Both of them are possible. I just think one of them, Bijan continuing to do what he's done, is likely, in fact, whereas Chubb doing something he really hasn't ever done is still possible, but it's not quite as possible, not as likely. It's still very possible. Oh, this is a good question because I have a pretty pre-canned answer. Can you help me understand if OLlavis ADP is justified? He was wide receiver 23 on a points per game basis. I get that the metrics were good, but could there be Saints offense context that we're not factoring in? I mean, to me, his metrics were good. Really undersells it. It's easy for me to answer this because I had this sort of pre-canned answer from the happy hour. If you go and check out yesterday's show, I think we did back-to-back days and a lot of segments, so I don't remember which day it was on. Watch all of the happy hour. Go watch Mondays and Tuesdays. Olave wasn't just good as a rookie. Let's get one thing straight. Olave was one of the best rookies we've seen in the past decade. He ranked, I believe it was 4th in yards per route run among all rookie wide receivers in the past decade, and 7th in target share among all rookie wide receivers in the past decade. All of them, with reasonable thresholds for you have to play some amount of games to get target share or whatever. But point being, he, both in terms of efficiency and volume, which is really nice, being able to do both of them, they go hand in hand to a degree, but they're not one-to-one, right? So being able to both show that you can run him out there every play, and he's not just wind sprinting. Every route he runs is one of the best routes, in terms of how many yards it produces for you, that a rookie has ever run, ever being, I looked like 10 or I think it was 10 years of data. And every time he is on the field, he is out targeting his teammates. His teammates weren't great last year. He played some games with Michael Thomas, I think, but it wasn't many. But still, he was up there with the best of them. And when you do both of those, really, even if you do one of them, it is a just flashing signal in the sky that this guy is going to be a star. When you look at the best receivers as rookies by yards per route run, you see names at the top that, one, they're extremely intuitive. It's Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Odell Beckham, Julio, I believe, was up there. It is AJ Brown was way up there as far as rookie yards per route run, I believe. It is just studs. If you perform well in yards per route run as a rookie, it is extremely strong signal for your future production. Then you look at target share, and again, it's just absolute studs. And then there's one exception, it's Kelvin Benjamin. Somehow Kelvin Benjamin sneaks in there. And I believe Sammy Watkins also had a strong target share, although he's had a good career, just hasn't been a, perennial 1,500 yards guy. But the one real exception is Kelvin Benjamin, which I love seeing that when I go back and look at the stats. But the yards per route run, extremely strong indicator from rookie to future production. And the guys who are the best at it, it's just the stars. It's really not anyone else. And the target share is extremely similar. Also a reason I'm in on Drake London this year. So to me, he doesn't just have a good rookie season. He had a rookie season that has been replicated only by the future best receivers in the league. I'm not really projecting much of, I'm not projecting much of a role for Michael Thomas. I think he can still go out there and get targets, but you have to look at him as more of the Adam Thielen of this team. Adam Thielen out there last year, running routes, getting some targets. You could not have cared less what he was doing for the sake of Justin Jefferson. Adam Thielen was getting whatever Justin Jefferson wasn't. He was not impacting that. Michael Thomas hasn't been a meaningful wide receiver in the NFL since 20 20, right? He didn't play much last year, the year before that. Was he hurt? Oh, if it's 2019, that is so long ago. Either way, extremely long time that I don't want to project him to go out there and be dominant target hog Michael Thomas. He can go out there and still earn his cut, but his cut ain't taken out of Chris Olave. And after that, it's like Rashid Shaheed, A.T. Perry, really good. I'm glad he made the roster. Happy to see that. But, it's just guys. So I'm projecting strong target share, strong efficiency. And last year, this offense was dreadful. Derek Carr is fine, but going from the quarterback play they got last year to Derek Carr, that's an upgrade. Like, even if I don't draft Derek Carr, but I can acknowledge that that's an upgrade. So upgraded offense, rookie wide receiver with an elite ceiling based on what we saw last year. I am windmilling my Chris Olave picks. I think he's kind of a free pick going, even like in, sicko wide receiver best ball drafts early in the third. To me, we want to bet on talent, especially at receiver. Receiver talent correlates to fantasy points better than maybe quarterback also does, but much better than running back, maybe even better than tight end. I'd probably say it does. But we know that if we can predict a player's talent at receiver, we're going to do a good job of predicting their fantasy points. And he's got all the signals of a guy who is hyper talented. He's also hyper talented in college. He had, I believe it was a JSN. JSN was younger, but I believe it was a JSN Garrett Wilson team that he led in receiving yards. He didn't lead his final year because JSN did, but the year before that, which probably would have been 19 or 20, probably 2020, 2019, he led a really multi-first round receiver team in college in receiving yards. So everything is there for me. Let's see. You think the Saints will heavily use Kamara when he comes back? I don't. So the weird thing with Kamara last year is that he was heavily used, just not in Alvin Kamara ways. It was so strange. Like the rate of his routes that he ran lined up as a receiver, either slot or out wide, was a career low. His third down snaps per game was a career low. And he was playing a ton of snaps. And he wasn't they weren't completely scaling his routes back. They just were using him as if he were any other generic running back. And he's not. He's Alvin Kamara, and he's Alvin Kamara getting older. You need to maximize that stuff he does, get him to the outside as a running back, don't run him between the tackles, and then line him up in the slot, get him lined up on linebackers. And instead, they really gave us the least exciting version we possibly could have gotten of him. And so I think they'll use him heavily. I think that is almost a certainty. The bigger question is, will they use him intelligently? I don't think they did last year. I'm going to give them some credit in rectifying that, but I'm not willing to go all in on saying they sort of figured this out. It's a bit more of a prove it to me situation. He's getting older. We've seen his efficiency stuff decline. He's certainly not a bad running back, far from that, but I'm not sure he's 2019 Alvin Kamara. I don't know if we still have that level of juice in him, and then they're not using him in a way that promotes whatever he has left in the tank. So I'm more so out on Alvin Kamara, not even based on pure raw touches. I think he probably gets enough touches where you look at the box score and you go oh yeah, that was 16 carries, 6 targets or whatever. But I don't think they're going to set him up for success over a full 17 games. He actually is only getting 14. So I'm more so out on him. He's not a guy I take 0 of, although I'm pretty low on him. What do we got here? Shane Howard says, I'm in a 10-man PPR with 8-man bench for my wide receiver core. I have Garrett Wilson, Amari Cooper, Deontay Johnson. You go, some good receivers there. Christian Watson, Michael Thomas, and Adam Thielen. I don't like the Michael Thomas and Adam Thielen picks. If you were really down bad at receiver, you're like, I need some points, I still would look elsewhere, but that's the rationale in which you take these players, Michael Thomas and Adam Thielen, because I'm sure Adam Thielen is going to run 85 to 90% of the routes. He's locked in to both 3 and 2 wide sets. DJ Chark's banged up. Terrace Marshall was banged up earlier. Mingo, I like drafting Mingo, but he wasn't a great prospect in my opinion. There's a lot of routes out there for him. We saw, I think he's 3 to 4 years in a row now, yards per route run for Adam Thielen plummeting. He's getting older. His team chose to, I believe he wasn't, was he cut? I don't think he was cut. I think he was a free agent. But either way, he's changing teams. Like, these are the red flags of a player who is not even like at the cliff. He's over the cliff now. So I think he can get you some cheap PPR points every now and then. And Michael Thomas is maybe like a more sort of wider range of outcomes. He could maybe have something left in the tank. It's possible. It's certainly possible. It's a long shot for him to really have a ton left in the tank. But to me, I treat both of these players like, if I need a flex, because I'm, 3 wide receivers and then probably throw a receiver in the flex, especially in full PPR, they can make my roster when like bye weeks start hitting. You're stacked at receiver. You don't need that guy. Like, every single week, you're getting Garrett Wilson, Amari Cooper, and Deontay Johnson. Like, yeah, and Christian Watson. Even when the buys hit, like, I'd much rather take a real high upside or, high upside, low floor player. Like, say Kadarius Toney was there where Michael Thomas was. I don't know if he was, but let's say he was. Give me that guy, because I'm skeptical of Kadarius Toney. I'm very skeptical of Kadarius Toney. But in the scenarios in which Kadarius Toney really jams, he could outscore Deontay Johnson. He could outscore Christian Watson. Like, he has a ceiling that actually makes it so you might play him at any point, where you are only playing Michael Thomas on an individual bye week. And even then, maybe you're just playing Adam Thielen, like, especially taking both of them. Maybe you take one of the safe guys, but I would have gone ceiling with one of the Michael Thomas or Adam Thielen picks, like full ceiling, no floor. Just take some guy who, take your flavor of the month on a Bateman. Like, I think Bateman could go out. Mark Andrews out targets him. Zay Flowers is better than we expect, and they don't pass as much. He's not particularly useful. But man, when he is useful, he can be like the primary, heavily used deep threat for Lamar Jackson on an offense that passes a lot more this year. That guy can be cracking your lineup on a given week over Deontay Johnson. Like, they play in a good shootout type of game. You play him over Deontay. You could play him over Christian Watson. I think the Michael Thomas and Adam Thielen picks are somewhat redundant because your receivers are so good ahead of them. And then between the two of them, they are very redundant. So, but you also, I don't mind that you didn't, in my opinion, nail the final 2 receiver picks, because you did nail the first 1, 2, 3, 4, and those are the picks that matter more. So overall, I'm going to call this a B-. What do we got here? Hope pronounced your last name right. Brendan Graup. Should I trade Mark Andrews for Montgomery? Is this, I assume, David Montgomery, Marquise Brown? No. The thing is, like, when you say your team has no depth, where your team has depth? It's on the waiver wire. Your depth will come in week 1 when J.K. Dobbins plays 40% of the snaps and Gus Edwards plays 38% of the snaps, or, something horrific like that. When Deion Jackson or Zach Moss, Zach Moss wasn't drafted in, I assume, any of anyone's leagues up until today. Zach Moss is healthy. I think he broke his arm, but it supposedly should be back by week 1. Whatever. Name your Deion Jackson, Evan Hull, Zach Moss. That guy goes out and gets 60% of the snaps. That guy's your depth. You don't need depth to a degree. I think if you truly, every single spot on your bench is an unusable player, and every spot on your bench, you're like, that could be a waiver wire guy. You don't want that. You do want to be able to, when your team has injuries or buys, throw another player in the flex and still have a very strong flex play. But especially right now, when we haven't hit your injuries yet, when we haven't hit bye weeks yet, I'm not extremely concerned with my team's depth. I'm pretty unconcerned. So for now, I would say you can consider your team's depth to be the waiver wire, and whoever you have. I'm sure you have some usable guys on that. So I would not make this move. I am also notably high on the Ravens this year. I don't think I'm Lawrence Jackson levels of excited about the Ravens. I'm still pretty excited about the Ravens. So, and Mark Andrews is an elite talent. So there's really no reason for me at this point of the game, which is not even to the final week before the season yet, to trade Mark Andrews, unless you're getting like other studs for him, unless it's just a great deal. And this is a similar question. I'd say this is a better deal. I guess, yeah, this is probably a better deal. Terry McLaurin and Cam Akers, but it's still not doing it for me. 13 pick in a 16 team best ball is a good format for like these larger leagues. I don't want to have to think about like with Deontay, like in 16 team league, your final, let's say it's 3 receivers in a flex. You're like, oh, do I start Deontay Hardy or Jaden Reed this week in my flex? What about Gus Edwards? Let the best ball gods figure it out. So how would you start off in the first and second round? You have picks 13 and something like the 19, I think. I don't know. How do you start off in the first and second round? Would you take kicker and defense or just take a 0 during the bye? How do you start off in the first and second rounds? First, they're separate questions. I thought it was like, would you take kicker and defense in the first and second round? It took me a little bit. Yeah, first and second at 13. There's probably still a receiver I'm looking at there. And this, again, is a full PPR one. Yeah, it's a pretty strong bet. I'm going receiver there. You could like swing me on maybe a Tony Pollard there as well. But full PPR, knowing that you are after pick, I think you're 19 is what I said, on your second rounder, you're waiting a while. Receivers are going. I'm probably going one of like Devontae or Garrett Wilson. I'm guessing one of those guys. Or Monroe, if he falls, will be there at 13. 16, you're more fungible if Tony Pollard made it at 16. Oh, that'd be fun. But then I'm probably still looking at receiver, assuming none of the running backs I want fall. I'm personally relatively low on Saquon Barkley this year. If you're not, he's a good pick there. Although he probably doesn't even make it there anymore because he's skyrocketing up boards. I don't know. I would take the receivers there. Jalen Waddle. If you can get a Devontae falling, he makes it there in regular best ball leagues relatively often, way too often. Even like a Devonta Smith. So I'm probably double tapping receiver, barring a Tony Pollard or how your league mates feel on Nick Chubb, like if he makes it to you at 16, but probably not. He goes like in pick 12 or 13 in regular best balls. So would you take bench kicker? Depending on how deep your kicker and defense is, I probably am, or how deep your bench is, assuming it's like any reasonable amount of best ball bench. I am certainly taking 2 of each of those. I'm not taking the 0. If it's a really shallow roster, that's weird. If it's a really shallow roster, maybe I'm taking the 0. It's not the end of the world, but I assume you can afford it, given that if this is like 20 rounds, like the spot you're going to take your second kicker, you're taking him over, a Deontay Hardy. Like, I've been boosting him in the rankings, or like, I like Luke Musgrave, but if you have a good tight end, he's not making your roster that much. Or if you have 3 of them, he's not making your starting roster that much. That second kicker, that second defense is making a decent amount of starts for you. So I am almost certainly getting both a double kicker and a double defense. Shane says, thoughts on my wide receiver core, 10-man PPR, 8-man bench. I feel like, did I miss? Oh, I wonder if you just repeated it and adding Drake London, or did I not read that? No, you just didn't have Drake London in the first one, which makes me even more right. If you have Drake London on the team, you also really, really didn't need Michael Thomas or Adam Thielen. Those guys are not making your roster. Like, you're never starting them. Drop Dobbs off the bench and snag Dalton Schultz, who was just dropped. Probably not. I mean, if you are down bad at tight end, I guess. But I'm not really dying to pick up Dalton Schultz. I don't love Dobbs either. He seems like a fine starting-ish level player. But I could see Jaden Reed, when they're on the field together, being better earning targets. I could see like even Luke Musgrave being that guy. I expect Christian Watson to be that guy. So I probably wouldn't. Just depends what your team looks like, though. If you're desperate, you got really beat at tight end, I get the thought process behind it. But I'm also, like I said, I'm not really big on Dalton Schultz this year. So this is a bit of my own player take versus the strategy. So I'm going to say keep Dobbs unless you really think you need a tight end. This is in reference to the, this is a good team. This is in reference to that, I believe, wide receiver team. It's a good looking team. Should have taken more shots on running back instead of Michael Thomas and Adam Thielen. Let's see. Am I insane for thinking about Bijan over CMC and Eckler's my hero RB? Definitely over CMC. You're insane. We're checking you in somewhere. We need to get a little update on that brain of yours. Eckler too. As much as I'm like, oh, his rushing efficiency is actually dropping. If you look at the advanced stats, like, what if they throw deeper more and he gets fewer targets? Like, at the end of the day, those are sort of things we should be using to round out our analysis. Like we should be looking at rushing efficiency, knowing how this guy is being used and where he's gaining his points. And we should be looking at the team's trends. What are they trying to do? Last year, all the receivers were hurt and they only wanted to throw it 4 yards downfield to Austin Eckler. It's important to know that I don't think they're doing that as much this year. But the most important thing, the most predictive thing year over year is going to be last year's opportunities and last year's fantasy points. I don't want to push so hard against that I'm taking Bijan over Eckler. I get it. Actually, I want to push against that because I want to be taking Bijan, but I'm not going to do it. I know that in the long run, someone who's been scoring as many points as Austin Eckler throughout his career, even though he's getting a little older, his rushing efficiency was it wasn't particularly good last year. He was mostly the touchdown production and the receiving production that really propelled him to like a legendary season. Those things are going to hold up over time fairly well, better than my micro player takes about like throwing extra passes to Quentin Johnson will. So you're insane. You should definitely take CMC over Bijan. You should still take Eckler over Bijan, though, I'm a little less confident in that, but I'm relatively confident in that. What else do we got here? 12-team keeper start 2 quarterbacks. I kept Herbert and Eckler. Sounds good. I have the second pick. I want to get one of the top running back wide receivers. Bijan, Chubb, Pollard, Lamb, Kupp, or do I go QB? I assume, I wouldn't go QB here. There's not an elite quarterback. I do love me some Richardson, but there's not an elite quarterback here that should swing you over what are like many elite shots at running back and wide receiver. If it's a keeper, it's only half PPR, and it's a keeper league, and I don't know, every keeper league has their different scoring or different rules on how they get to decide your keeper. Assuming it's like it's a meaningful advantage to have a young player who's going to be really good for a long time on your roster, I would take Bijan. If that means you like forfeit a valuable first round pick, say like the first round still has like this one has a lot of good options, then I probably go Kupp. But assuming you like get a meaningful edge by keeping Bijan or drafting Bijan and then having the rights to hold on to him year over year over year, I think we're looking at a big run of RB1 seasons from Bijan. I can't say I know he's going to be the RB1 overall for the next 5 years, but I think we're getting a lot of top 12. I think we're getting a lot of top 5, frankly, seasons from him over the next few years. And I want that guy on my roster versus much older, more ambiguous situation, Chubb, Pollard, more ambiguous in that I know they have the chance, at least, especially Pollard, to switch teams in the coming years. Whereas Bijan locked in for almost certainly 5 years, assuming maybe it's not a great assumption, but assuming they pick up his 5th-year option, he's locked into the same team that right now is probably as bad as it's going to be for him. Like they're using like a 3rd-round quarterback. They're probably getting a quarterback upgrade in the next few years. So I'm likely going Bijan. If you think it's no real meaningful edge to have Bijan in your roster, like it's very expensive to hold on to him, then probably give me Kupp. But otherwise, you want Bijan on your team for a very long time. Given the choice, Tim H says, given the choice of the two, are you drafting Dalton Kincaid or Jake Ferguson? Straight up, I'll take Dalton Kincaid. I've been a big voice of what I feel is a voice of reason in the Dalton Kincaid wars, simply talking about like how little teams use 2 tight end and how hard it is for a second tight end on a team to have a meaningful impact if he's not the clear starter, which I don't think he will be. So with that being said, Jake Ferguson is almost certainly just a guy who is likely 4th, if not like 5th on his team in targets. I will take Dalton Kincaid here. Let's see. How are you ranking Ramondre, Etienne, Walker, and Gibbs? I hope this goes on YouTube page after because I can't listen right now. Oh, so you're just asking questions knowing that I will answer at some point and going to plan to go back. I respect that. That is a grind I respect. I assume somewhere you don't have headphones, but you decided very kindly that you wanted my opinion. which I will give. That's very funny. It's like seeing me like speaking like, oh, what could be saying? How are you ranking Ramondre Etienne, Kenneth Walker, and Gibbs? I think before the Zeke signing, I had Ramondre I had him in a tier above these guys. And I think even then, Etienne should have been in his tier. But since they signed Zeke, I don't think it's the end of the world they signed Zeke. He's old. He's cheap. He's not good. But they're going to give him some work. It is almost certain that they will give him some work. And to me, if that work comes where Zeke is, quote, best, he's like a fine success rate player. I think if you ask him for a yard or two, he'll be about league average at his chances of getting that yard or two. Now, if you ask for 4 or 5, his odds of getting that drop off drastically. But he's probably a still capable pound out 2 yards and get in the end zone is the problem kind of guy. And more importantly, we've seen the Patriots been extremely predictable or extremely vocal, I guess, in their desire to ratchet Ramondre Stevenson's touches back. They brought in Leonard Fournette. There were rumors they didn't want to use him as much. They brought in Zeke. They finally signed Zeke. They're supposedly in the Dalvin Cook sweepstakes. I'm not sure how much we get from Zeke, but it could be damaging work. Like he could get 100 carries and score 4 touchdowns or whatever. So I flipped Etienne over him after they signed Zeke. I still think they're both strong picks. Gibbs right behind them. And I think there's a gap to Kenneth Walker. I think Ramondre has a path to 3-down work, a very obvious path to 3-down work. It's that the Zeke stuff doesn't end up panning out. Zeke is so bad they don't play him, and Ramondre is who we saw last year. Great. I can see that. Makes a lot of sense. Etienne, his receiving game usage, a little suspect. I'll admit, a little suspect. But he was an incredible receiver in college, highly used. He has been not only great at like breaking tackles, breaking long runs in the NFL, but he's been fairly consistent. He's not a guy who's so boom bust that we're like, oh, are the coaches going to get fed up with this? And one game they'll scale him back to 12 carries. And some games they'll get him to 20. No, he's both a high floor and a high ceiling rusher on like an individual play level basis. And he has pass catching potential. Does that materialize? It's a little suspect at this point. He hasn't been the best pass catcher in the NFL. Trevor Lawrence also doesn't seem the most interested in throwing to running backs, but there's a path for him to be 3-down elite, and he's almost certainly 2-down elite. Like, I don't think we're going to see enough of Tank Bigsby that you're looking back and saying, like, no running back, at least very few, doesn't have a backup that comes in and spells them at times. I don't think Tank is invested enough in by the team or has shown enough. I mean, he's good in the preseason, but even then, like, it's a small sample size, and we know it's not particularly predictive at like NFL, like at week 1 usage. I think he's going to be used about as much as the average backup, maybe even a little less, because Etienne's really good. Walker, he is that boom bust. Like, his success rate stuff is pretty low. His highs are high. His best runs are as good as anyone, but he goes through stretches kind of like Saquon does, where he is like sort of frustrating, I imagine, for a coach. And then they go out and they invest not only, I believe, Charbonnet higher picking Bigsby, but then again, again, they get Kenny McIntosh. They to me seem a little more focused on getting a guy who can take away valuable touches, especially pass catching work. If Charbonnet goes out and prevents Walker from getting pass catching work, and he's a big dude, he can also play at the goal line, the risk level is a little higher. I like Walker, but we're talking about a little bit more of a risk. Gibbs is super weird. It's super hard to predict because he's sub 200 pounds, was like not highly used in college in terms of total touches. He also plays for an offense that is just tailor-made to put running back points on the board. So I think I'm going to take him over Walker. That one's tougher. I feel confident in going Etienne, Ramondre, a little tier break, Gibbs and Walker. And this is probably exclusively for full PPR. I guess maybe half PPR, Gibbs over Walker as well. But I do think, Gibbs enters the league as one of the best pass catching backs I've seen in a long time. He enters a system where he should be extremely efficient as a runner. We know they can get near the goal line. We got to see him get used at the goal line, though. So that's why he falls on the other side of the tier break of Ramondre and Etienne to me. Do you think McKinnon gets used similar last year and has similar value? I think He probably gets used similar to last year, although we didn't really see that player come on until like deep down the stretch. I wonder if that's a thing where he is he's like 30 something years old with a history of pretty bad injuries. Don't play that guy a ton over 17 weeks. You're the Chiefs. You're going to make the playoffs. That guy is really good when he's at his best, but he's an old running back with a history of pretty rough injuries. You don't have to use him in week 2. You don't have to give him 16 routes, 9 carries, 5 targets or whatever in week 2. So it wouldn't surprise me if his usage is like pretty spiky. At its best, it looks like it did last year, but there are like whole games where they get an early lead because they're the Chiefs and they just do not use him, which would be understandable. Like we also see this with like Andy Reid's play calling. He is a significantly better play caller. He's a good play caller in the regular season. He has another level. He brings out some juice in the postseason. He knows the strategy. He knows that he's freaking Andy Reid and he's got Patrick Mahomes. You can save a little bit for the postseason. So wouldn't be surprised to see a little bit of that with his player, like with his player usage. And maybe even more importantly, McKinnon did run good on like efficiency and touchdown production. So I think similar usage probably over the course of the full season, in that McKinnon wasn't always McKinnon last year, but he probably regresses a little bit in terms of efficiency. So I'm guessing it's less valuable than we saw last year, and especially less valuable than what we remember, because we have like really fond memories of the best weeks. Don't remember so much the early part of the season where he wasn't getting used as much. All right, what do we got here? Kyle Ellis says, would you trade Chase and Njoku for Bijan Goddard? 10-team PPR. Oh, tough question. I don't think so. I think I'm sitting on Chase. I mean, Chase to me is like clear 102. Bijan is more of like, in full PPR, he's probably the 112 or something like that. In full PPR, I probably consider flipping like Amon-Ra over him. Garrett and Devontae are sort of up there with him. Diggs is clearly over him in full PPR. So no, I think in full PPR, getting the 102 versus getting the 112, let's call it 111, whatever you want, is not, you don't want to give that up for the gap between Njoku Goddard. It is close. Let's see. Is it safe to keep Njigba on the bench in spite of his recent injury? Yes, I am 100% keeping him on my bench, and I've been drafting him as his price has fallen. Elite prospect, I think a really strong offense. He looks like a match made in heaven for Geno Smith's play style and where he wants to throw the football, and he's already back at practice. I assume it's, I saw one video of him. It's probably individual drills. I still think he's maybe a dog to play in week 1, but he was on your bench. You weren't playing him almost certainly in week 1 anyway. We expect him to come on as the season goes along. Only missing 1 week is fine with me. I'd rather him not miss any weeks, but 1 week is fine. 100% keep him on the bench. All right. I'm about to wrap up, but I will rapid fire. Sorry if you got in here late. I've been waxing poetic on some of the early questions, and I will rapid fire through a bunch of these, try and keep the analysis tight. 1 quarterback, 2 wide receivers, whatever. You can read the things. I took up Lamb, Andrews, Keenan Allen. How do you feel about the whole 0 running back build? Love this 0 running back build, especially if you are in a 3 receiver, 1 or more flex, where you can start 4 wide receivers, or in your case, you can crush your opponents at tight end and play at least 3 of these receivers. You've got a pretty good shot to have the best over the first wide receiver. Sure, the Justin Jefferson team has you beat. Maybe the Chase team has you beat, but you've got a top 5 wide receiver. Your wide receiver 1 on average is better than the league's wide receiver 1. Your wide receiver 2 and CeeDee Lamb, getting Cup Lamb is actually really nutty. Your wide receiver 2 is all very likely the best number 2. And your wide receiver 3 is extremely likely to be the best wide receiver 3. You are burying your opponents through 3 wide receiver spots. You snuck in a Mark Andrews. You are almost certainly you're burying everyone but Travis Kelce at tight end. This is perfectly fine. And this is more than fine. It's quite good. All right. Zig Mover says, wondering if my team's good. QB Hurts and Richardson, running backs Henry, Javonte Williams, Kamara, Montgomery, Jeff Wilson, Ty Chandler, wide receivers Adams, Higgins, Jigba, Adam Thielen. I think for me, I think it is a good team. I would have flipped probably the Wilson and Chandler I probably would have flipped like your final 3 running backs, Dave Montgomery, Jeff Wilson, Ty Chandler, 4 wide receivers, because you've got a strong wide receiver 1, really strong wide receiver 2. I don't know what we're getting out of JSN in the first week. Although, like, if this is, a no points per reception league, this is fine. But when is Ty Chandler making your lineup? Derrick Henry's really good. You're not taking him out. I assume that's Javonte. Sounds right. You're not taking him out. You're probably not taking, assuming you can play 3 of them. You're not taking Kamara out much. Like, Montgomery is a good replacement for Kamara if Kamara isn't good. You didn't need Wilson or Chandler. Should have built up the wide receiver depth. It's full PPR. Yeah, should have really fleshed out those receivers. Though I think you started the draft strong, and you'd rather start the draft strong where all of the picks matter than finish the draft strong where, like, a good strong ending to the draft is like, I got a usable flex player. So let's keep moving. Waddle or Ridley? Still Waddle for me. What do you expect out of Jalen Hyatt this year? Would you draft him over a guy like Zay Jones, Dobbs, or Marvin Mims? I would not draft him over any of them, except maybe Dobbs. If your team was like set at wide receiver, you don't need to add another guy. Just add a guy with late season upside. That's the only one I would take. Maybe take him over. I think it's probably a long way away before we see Jalen Hyatt be like a usable fantasy option. It just seems very clear from the preseason usage that Paris Campbell is the starting slot receiver, and now Wandale is back, and they like their outside guys. Like, Hodgins and Slayton are fine, but like, they both played really well down the stretch last year. They both know the system well. So if they want to move Hyatt outside, which he didn't do at all in college, I think he's capable of it. They did it in the preseason. He's got guys to beat there. Jones is also not much of a deep ball thrower. He's solid at it. He just doesn't do it. So I think it's probably a guy you're holding for a while. Let's see. What do you think of Rodgers Garrett Wilson stack? Love the stack. Thoughts on Jacoby Myers? He's good. Like, he's been a consistent target earner throughout his career. I think he's obviously a low ceiling play because there's no way he's ever leading his team in targets. But I find myself like, I'd much rather get him as like, I need a flex play than the price I have to pay for Michael Thomas or the price I have to pay for Adam Thielen. I think he's the sweet spot of guys where, like, not as fun of a pick, but a good one. I traded CMC and Hunt, I assume Kareem Hunt, for Bijan and Gabe Davis. That's probably good. I mean, assuming it's Kareem Hunt, I can't think of another one. He's like a fringe roster kind of guy. Like, he's a deep best ball cut, whereas Gabe Davis is a legit, like, he's a legit wide receiver 3 candidate. You probably won value there. Let's see. Is Kareem Hunt worth a roster spot over these guys? Devon H. and Damian Harris? Probably not over those guys. I don't lose. This is about the keeper question. I will come back to that at time. Spears worth holding on to. I love stashing Spears if you can kind of afford to wait it out. What else do we get? If you don't get one of the top 8 QBs, who would you most like to have? Anthony Richardson. The dude's like literally Derrick Henry level of athlete. I'll end trying to figure out what was going on with my keeper question. I don't lose a pick by keeping players. Can only keep for 3 years. So Kupp over Bijan, the 2 QB. 3 years is enough of a window for me to say keep Bijan Robinson or draft Bijan Robinson because you want him in 2026. Long time away. Yeah, you're going to want Bijan in 2026 and 2025 and maybe even 2024 over Cooper Kupp, just based on his age. Like, it's really hard for a player to be that good for that long. It's much easier for a 21-year-old running back to do it, or 22, whatever he is. All right, I'll end on this one. Twitch question. Thanks for tuning on Twitch. Thanks for tuning in on YouTube if you are. I got offered Diggs for Waddle and Mike Williams. What do you think? Yeah, give me Waddle and Mike Williams unless you have like no need for that final receiver spot. But if you plan on using Mike Williams, which most teams are using Mike Williams if they have him, give me Waddle and Mike Williams. I think the difference between Diggs and Waddle is big. It's probably around an ADP. It's probably like the 109 or 110, whatever, versus 208, 209. But Mike Williams makes up that difference and then some. So we'll end on that, guys. Everyone, thanks for tuning in. So many questions. Did not expect to have this many, and I'm glad I could get through at least what I thought was most of them. we'll try and do this again sometimes. So thank you everyone for tuning in. Have a good week, and here's to football. We are really close.